This is the room there.
Can everybody hear me? Okay, great. Sorry, my computer needs to update, but I don't have access, so I have to join from my phone today. Welcome to our meeting. I believe everyone we expect is here. Ray, Gustavo, Jessica, Maria. Okay, so Tara Lynn is not going to be here again today, so we will have to need a volunteer to be the stand-in chair for today. Do we have any volunteers for that? It's very easy and I'll walk you through it.
I'm happy to do it.
Okay, thanks, Jessica. Okay, so
I just want to flag, I actually have a meeting with the pro tem at 3, so I'll need to jump off at 3 o'clock. Just a heads up, guys. Sorry.
okay, we'll see what okay, sounds good. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is roll call. And I can, Jessica, if you don't mind, calling the order to roll call, and I can read off everyone's names.
Okay, I'm calling the meeting to order. Do we need a first and second on that, or a second on that? No. Okay, calling the meeting to order. Okay, roll call. Ray Criscitello.
Here.
Gustavo, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on your last name. Gustavo.
Medina, it's okay. Gustavo Medina.
Great. Maria Salinas.
Here.
Okay. Jessica Pitt here.
And Tara Lynn Gray absent.
Okay, Tara Lynn Gray absent.
Okay, great. The next thing we need to do is call order to approve the meeting agenda.
Okay, can I have a motion to approve the meeting agenda?
So moved, Maria.
Maria, do I have a second?
Second, Ray.
Second by Ray. Okay. All in favor of approving the meeting agenda? Jillian, do you want to show it? Can you share your screen or?
I cannot because I can't.
Oh, you can't. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, does anyone else have it? Lisa, do you have it by any chance? Or we'll go on, or we can go on faith. Okay, so all in favor of approving the meeting agenda, which we do not have in front of us.
Aye.
Ayes. Any nays?
For the clarity of the record and any members of the public, the meeting agenda should be available on the website and posted. So if anyone wants to review it as a member of the public, you can find it there.
Great, thank you, Lisa. Okay, so I think we just approved that, so we can now move on.
All right, item number 3 is approval of the March 7th, or no, I'm sorry, that's an old one. Approval of the, is it June 24th was our last meeting, meeting minutes.
Okay. All in favor of, or a motion to approve the minutes from our June 24th meeting. Do I have a second?
Second, Maria.
Maria, okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposed. It passes.
Okay, great. And our last item is to discuss the draft, the study, and discuss any decisions that need to be made and either approve or not approve. So we can just open the floor to the study draft discussion.
Since Gustavo has to go at 3, can we just get clarity on what we hope to accomplish today? Do we want to try to actually approve the report today? And if so, do we want to try to do that before Gustavo jumps off at 3? Or are we going to wait and do the final approval at a future meeting? Lisa, can we get some guidance from you on that maybe?
So it may not, you're welcome to discuss sort of general intentions, but it's possible both as a practical matter that it may not be clear until you sort of discern whether, are there panelists who have sort of significant substantive comments, questions that require more discussion, or it's possible there could be more general guidance that in the nature of, forget if it was a statement of work or what it was, or maybe initial comments on the outline of the draft. If it were general guidance that could be delegated to agency staff supporting the panel to oversee the the input of, then it's possible you could approve the report today. But I'm not sure if it is clear enough at this point to make that determination. And if you were to do that, you'd probably want to do that as sort of a general intention, not as a sort of official action.
Yeah, and I'm happy to jump in and give you my thoughts on that because I do think that the report fairly significant, and I know last time we had talked about making sure we had enough time to really go through it. So I guess from my perspective, will we get any top line view on it? Because I believe we have a September meeting lined up as well. Does that sound right? And I would find it difficult to approve at this juncture, given that we just got the report. Just last week, was it, or the week before? That's my thought on it.
Yeah, one option for the panel to consider would be to provide input. Here at the meeting, members of the panel could also, as individuals, provide, say, written comments that would be made public for the consideration. Any input that sort of a panel action would have to be sort of by majority vote, but as any member of the public, you could also provide your own written or oral comments to the report, and then see a revised draft, which that could be acted upon at the next meeting or after as necessary.
Yep, I agree with Maria that I think it'd be hard to approve it today. I am curious to hear from David and others about the report and thoughts that went behind it, and be able to not only ask questions but hear what other thoughts, what others have as far as questions and thoughts are concerned. And knowing that we have the September meeting to circle back on this is helpful, because from today we can provide feedback, obviously, and then see what direction, if any new direction or any new avenues need to be explored as we move forward with this study.
Yeah, I have the same feeling as Gustavo. I do have really significant feedback, which I wrote out because it's kind of hard to keep track of. So I'm not exactly sure the best way to do that. Like, I can orally give some of it, but I also have it written out in the hopes that it would get considered for another draft. I don't know if before September is realistic, or because I also wasn't sure of the process at this point, but I did come ready with my own feedback for things that I would hope to see in what would end up being a final report.
Should we dive in then, right? Would you be willing to start us off with your feedback?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I feel nervous doing this. I take my role as a panelist really seriously, and I really appreciate the incredible amount of work that's gone into this. So I don't want to sound like overly negative, but I also feel like it's our charge to give feedback. So that's what I'm trying to do. So I just kind of want to preface it with that. I don't want to take up tons of time and like read through how I tried to sort my thoughts either, but I have kind of categories of things that I'll at least touch on, and then I'm hoping I can send to David or everybody my written comments just so they could be kind of more thoroughly digested. But in general, when I was reading it, I was reading for what the like legislatively defined goals of the Power Act were. And I feel disappointed that the study does a poor job of addressing the specific scope of work and the legislatively mandated goals. The first and primary one being that the study doesn't give sufficient attention to the ACLC model itself, which is like the whole point of this. The one major exception is, I think it's Article 8. Yeah, Article 8. Honestly, to me, that section does the most thorough and direct job of addressing what would it take to have a model like this? What are the pros and cons? And really addressing the ACLC idea. And a lot of what's outside of that in the paper could be sort of rewritten to like be oriented towards that section or taken out. That's my personal opinion. Let's see. And then this next kind of category of concern I have is the over-reliance on evidence related to ESOPs, without carefully distinguishing between forms of ESOPs and the lessons that are generalizable or not to the proposed ACLC model. And I think like just the word and term ESOP shows up overwhelmingly in the whole paper, without regard to, what form of democracy is in particular ESOPs. And yeah, this particular parts that I think should be taken out, like the AI chatbot, proposal, I think is ill-fitting for what we're supposed to be considering in the paper. And yeah, there could be there is a role for all different forms of worker ownership, ESOPs included, but the way that it's done doesn't speak to me to the ACLC or worker-owned idea. Yeah. And then the next kind of category is failing to concretely analyze how the ACLC can contribute to union jobs, which is one of the legislative mandates for the report to consider. As the legislation defines high road jobs to include union jobs. And there's not any discussion of how the federated model through the ACLC could ensure, for example, that workers are deemed employees with the rights to organize under the NLRA, things like that. In the next section, the paper doesn't look at the specific mandate to consider potential benefits of the ACLC for Black workers, other communities whose wages have been historically suppressed, or the racial wealth gap in general. And, sort of data limitations and economic theories, which are often in the paper seem vague, are real though. I get that there's data limitations, but even if there is substantial literature on these types of topics, which just doesn't get considered. The policy recommendations and like agenda for further research, the policy part in particular, I had a hard time with. The policy recommendations are pretty vague in general, and like the report focuses more on firm level benefits of worker co-ops, without like looking at sort of the socially transformative extent to which the ACLC could transform the underlying dynamics we're trying to get at, like racial disparities, wealth disparities. Trying to decide what else to highlight. I think the rest of my thoughts are kind of sub points to those. So, a lot of it to me comes down to like refocusing and rewriting with an orientation towards the ACLC as like an aspirational idea, and what would it take for in this, the government actor, in this case, the state of California, to incentivize and create like a fertile structure to make that a possibility, instead of critiquing kind of the current underlying capitalism realities that might just make that impossible. So that, yeah,
Ray,
that-
pardon me.
that-
Can you just repeat that last sentence? I didn't quite follow.
Oh, sort of almost the tone of the whole thing feels like it's oriented towards like, here's the economic and financial reality that means none of this will work. And instead, I was hoping to see, here's an aspirational model, certainly critiques and poking holes in it, but also like this limited coverage of places like Mondragon and Emilia Romano, and places in the United States too, where federated co-op structures are very successful. So sort of propping those up and looking at the, how could, in a curious and unconfined way, if we were looking at regs and, state law, or and also, all sorts of infrastructure around how things can change. Like, what could we propose that would make that possible? Instead, it feels oriented towards like, well, here's why it won't work given today's structure.
And I just want to reinforce or emphasize that last point that Ray made, that I also had that hope and expectation that out of this we would have almost like a roadmap of how we make these possible. How do we create an environment where their co-ops are successful? And yeah, absolutely, we should acknowledge what the obstacles are, so that we can address them. But how can the state, how can others be supportive to make sure that we have an environment where we have co-ops that are successful? Because there are, like Ray pointed out, some examples out there of success, and my perspective is that we can have more examples if the conditions are or if the obstacles are addressed and we're supporting the creation and maintenance of co-ops.
I appreciate both comments. And I'd love more before I make any responses. Chair, should I be responding at this point? Is that appropriate?
Sure. Please do. Thank you, David.
I'll just say I appreciate the careful reading, and I understand there was the Power Act had a request. The contract I signed with the state was more about worker ownership and the ACLC than ACLC as the leading topic. So in some sense, we made ourselves more work because, as Ray said, we wrote a detailed paper on the ACLC, but we analyzed a lot of other types of ownership besides cooperative labor contractors in such a federation. And I think there's a tension to the extent we over-delivered, right? Gustavo says he wants co-ops to flourish. And Ray specifically pointed out this little AI chatbot isn't very focused on the ACLC, which we agree completely. But I just want to say, there's a lot of businesses selling. There's, as we heard on I think our first meeting, there's a silver tsunami and stuff. And most of them don't know anything about the idea of selling to their workers. And if they do want to find out about it, they're going to take an hour or two of time from co-op experts. And those folks are busy trying to get conversions going, not just trying to explain, are you possibly the right size and financially viable? So we did build a chatbot, and it works okay. It's focused on co-op conversions, or selling to your workers, co-op or ESOP. I think importantly, it would be extraordinarily easy to extend it to all types of business sales, which I think the state of California would like to help small businesses not just shut down when the owner retires. And what I want to emphasize is it was put together largely by a second-year grad student with background in sociology. It's really easy to make it and extend it. So I'm sort of going off on a tangent because I think Gustavo's last comment, we want co-ops to flourish, is a broader statement than Ray's focus on, in our chapter 8 and our one of our chapters of the report as well, focus just on the ACLC proposal, that there's lots of types of co-ops that aren't cooperative labor contractors, and that there's concern about ESOPs, and we should clarify when we're talking about more or less democratic ESOPs. And just to remind everybody, for a vast majority of ESOP members, it's just part of their retirement. There's no amount of workplace democracy or involved in it. So we should be more clear on that distinction, because a subset of them do have majority or entire worker ownership and have democracy, and those we said briefly at the beginning are the ones we're focusing on, but we should be more clear when the data are about all ESOPs or democratic ESOPs. But just to remind you, if you want worker ownership to flourish, there are vastly more people in ESOPs that are entirely worker owned than there are in co-ops. And so focusing only on co-ops is just neglecting the vast majority of where worker ownership is in the substantive sense, not just in the my pension fund holds some stock sense. So I think there was we should be clear when we're talking about ESOPs that are more or less empowering workers, but it was a conscious decision to include those ESOPs in what we consider as the potential for high road worker ownership. I think the biggest substantive disappointment that Ray and Gustavo are reflecting is that we didn't give a roadmap for how the ACLC can solve the really important problems of the fissured workplace. And we all agree that a whole lot of employees have jobs that aren't meeting their needs for security or even being classed as employees. And a lot of regulations have fallen behind on what you do with these fissured workplaces. The problems we all agree on. The ACLC is a clever proposal, and I just want to say that this wasn't laziness. We didn't come up with this proposal, right? The parts of the report Ray said wasn't quite sure were there included case studies of cooperative labor contractors, not under that name, but of worker-owned staffing agencies. And it's just a really tough model, that the starting point of where worker ownership is really solving problems for the employees is where you have a cohesive workforce where people can encourage each other to work hard. And that's just really tough in staffing agencies. Your dispersed workplaces, your short-term posts, so if you are working with somebody in home care, you're usually not, but if you are in a hospital, you're not working with them a week or a month later. A lot of people in agriculture, because of visa reasons, in healthcare, because they're looking for a permanent job, are just passing through the staffing agency. The reason we didn't give that roadmap is not because we didn't try, but because the ACLC is an ambitious vision that we didn't see that roadmap to making it an important part of the labor market. I understand your disappointment, but please understand it's not because, we were rooting for it. We wanted to say, we see how with some modest support, some regulatory changes or whatever, that this can really become a something that affects a meaningful share of the workforce, particularly people with disadvantages. If we saw that roadmap, that's what we would have focused on. And so this is disappointing to you. I understand that. It is disappointing for us, not in terms of we didn't do the right work, but that something we thought was very clever and promising, we couldn't see the vision to bring it to what Ray and Gustavo were describing. And we focused on other aspects because, as Gustavo closed, we want co-ops to flourish. I mean, that's not a vision that you guys have, and we don't. But it's the agreement we had with the state was to say what could help worker ownership flourish, and I mean, we have familiar policies we mentioned. We have ones I think are kind of creative, like to say a chatbot to help with conversions that Ray specified is exactly what was not what was asked for by the Power Act, but I think is part of the mission of trying to say, how do we build high road worker co-ops in the state of California and it's a tough job. And I can just say for the ACLC, you folks hoped we would find this recipe to make it work. And our failure to do that was not a failure to understand that was something we were looking for, but we looked and didn't find it. So I understand the disappointment and share it, but I don't think it's a failure of the team. That was more defensive than I intended. And Ray, we very much look forward to your written comments and anyone else, the public has sent at least one I haven't looked at yet, but comments from other panel members as you or your staff have time to digest. We are very grateful for. The folks at LWDA gave us very detailed comments that were very helpful. And I will make, let's see, I don't want to hold the floor very long. I want to make one process point. If we're going to have a September meeting, we would need to send you a revised report in a week. Yet we are just getting your feedback today, and we hope to have more come. I mean, I think what Jessica was saying, and I forget who said hadn't had time to digest the report. Yeah, Maria was saying hadn't had time to digest the report. So we would propose we have more than a week to respond to the feedback that has not yet been sent to us. And that would probably mean our contract runs out in September. We would ask for a no-cost extension, just so we have resources to keep revising as feedback arrives.
I can weigh in on that. So in terms of the contract extension, we have already begun that process. So hopefully that will get to you guys soon to extend it until the end of December. And also the meeting we have on the books for September was a hold. So I can very easily facilitate finding a time in October to meet if the panel thinks that timeframe makes more sense.
I hope all the panel understands what a pleasure it's working with people. By the time I ask, they're already answering it. And thank you, Julian, for being ahead of us. And I felt I was very defensive in that answer. I really appreciate feedback. And please, Ray was a little worried about hurting my feelings or something. Nothing hurts. These are very reasonable comments. And you're not going to hurt my feelings. Please say what you do or don't like about the report.
I guess I'd like to echo one aspect of Ray's comments, which is that I did feel like the report was very heavy on firm level recommendations, and lighter on the policy recommendations. And given the audience of this report, you know, I think I would have liked to see a little bit more about what we could do from a policy perspective around advancing worker-owned cooperatives. And yeah.
Thank you, David. It's helpful to hear how you're thinking about it. Could you let us know what is the best way to send our written thoughts in? Just send to you directly, is that okay?
I think Lisa, does it need to be made public, the comments?
Yeah.
So Ray, if you want to send them to me so that and I can, or me and David, just so that I can make sure I can record it for the public meeting purposes.
Okay, got it.
Any other comments from the panel? Lisa, should we take some public comment now if there's any? Okay, so Jillian, are you moderating that? Do we have any comments from the public?
I think between me and FAP, we should be able to figure it out.
Okay.
And just for anyone who's listening, comments can be made orally or in writing or both. So if you want to submit comments in writing that we'll post on the website and then do high level comments here, that's a perfectly fine way to do it. So, or if you just want to speak for a couple minutes in oral public comment, that is fine as well.
We're not seeing any public comments. Just trying to give folks a minute in case anyone's typing anything. Okay, oh, there's a question. So someone asked where to submit comments. So I'm just gonna respond by giving our LWDA email address. And hopefully anyone else who has that question can also see the answer. There's a couple more. So there's a comment from Tracy that says, very grateful for the work and hoping it may offer ideas for a model for arts workers as well. And I'm not seeing any more comments, so I think we're good there.
Do we have a deadline for getting comments to the study team?
I don't believe we set one. If that's something the panel would like to do, I suppose we could do that.
Well, I think it's more to be realistic in terms of when the study team needs feedback in order to turn it around by October.
Sure.
I think in principle, people could comment at any point, but it may be helpful for the study team to provide guidance on what realistically they would need in terms of a deadline to incorporate it. So people could still comment at any point they choose to, but if it's going to be taken into account for the purposes of finalizing the study team may have sort of realistic constraints that they could communicate. I do want to quickly, I noticed there's an attendee who mentioned a camera being disabled, and I don't know if they're referring to the LWDA or the panelist who's off camera, but I did check into that because of the general requirement of being on camera, and that Maria had to unexpectedly attend from a place that it's not technologically feasible to be on camera. So so we're aware of that, and she is off camera for a specific reason.
From our point of view, earlier is better, and it has to be the first half of September at the very latest, because that would just give us 2 weeks to respond to it, which is the minimum. We have a big team, we have to coordinate. But any feedback in the next few days is greatly appreciated. In the next week or two after that we appreciate all feedback, and sooner is better.
Okay, we have a couple more comments. Adria Sharf says, it's unclear how, oh, sorry. I want to add to my colleague David's emphasis on tough model to say the case study companies were first mover experiments and lessons I took away had to do with importance of long-term contracts and expertise. These models make more sense with long-term contract workers, not temporary. Thank you. And it looks like Michelle has her hand up. Fap, are you able to give Michelle the ability to unmute?
Hi, this is Michelle Grissat. So last meeting, the camera was inadvertently turned off during virtually the entirety of Professor Levine's presentation. So that's what I was referring to with the camera. So that information was not captured by video for the most part. I think if you review the video, you'll see that. And in fact, he commented on that when he came back on video, I believe. So I've been watching the little recording button here, so.
Oh, is the sound gone as well?
Video and yes, and audio are both gone from that last meeting.
Okay, thank you for bringing that to our attention.
And Jillian, in light of the comment in the chat about not knowing how to comment, could you tell members of the public how to go about indicating a desire to make an oral comment so that people can be aware?
Yes, so there are two ways that you can do this. You can use the raise hand feature on Zoom, and then we can unmute you so you can speak. And the other way to do that is to type a question in the question and answer section, and I can read it out loud and answer you over text. All right, I'm not seeing any other hand raised and I'm not seeing any additional questions. Another way that you can submit public comment is you can email studypanel@labor.ca.gov. And those are for if you have any written comments about the study report or any questions we can respond to there as well.
Okay, are we ready to adjourn the meeting for today? If we have, let me just open up the floor once more for comments from the panel.
I don't have anything else to add. I do appreciate David, you and your team taking the time to put this together. So thank you.
Yeah, it really does reflect a tremendous amount of work. I'd like to acknowledge that as well.
Mostly by the team, but we all appreciate it. Hi.
Okay, so do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Yeah, I motion.
Okay, that's Gustavo motioned. A second?
One second.
A second, okay. So the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.